Hello, everyone. Welcome to Be the Change on Air. I am so excited to be starting this, and I'm so excited to really kick off this new project, I guess. So I just wanted to do a little episode introducing myself and just sharing a little bit about what this show is going to be. I'm a podcaster, so I feel like the way that I speak is kind of more for podcasts, but I'm hoping to kind of change that a little bit, and that is going to be the whole purpose of this. So this is going to be kind of like a continuation of my podcast called Be the Change, and you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere that you get your podcasts. And so I just want to say welcome to the Xpress listeners, and then also welcome to my Be the Change podcast listeners, because I will be posting this on Fridays. So it's going to be like alternating the normal Be the Change episodes on Wednesdays and then these posted on Fridays. And so I just want to introduce myself, and I am Lily Mott. I am a postgraduate student at Cardiff this year, and I'm doing my MA in Digital Media and Society. I am originally from Colorado, which is definitely my favorite thing to tell people. I'm so proud to be from there. I think it's awesome. And I studied journalism and politics at Washington and Lee University in Virginia. And then for my entire junior year, so my third year, I studied at Oxford, and I just loved the UK, and I really wanted to come back, so here I am. And so I wanted to share just a little bit about, again, kind of the purpose of this. I'm coming to you live from the Xpress Radio Station in Cardiff, and this live show is an extension of my podcast, and the podcast features young people, especially kind of young changemakers, activists, advocates from around the world who are making a difference in their communities. And this show is going to feature young people who are making a difference in Cardiff, around Wales, and I may even have a few guests from other parts of the United Kingdom who are also making changes in their communities, depending on if I can get them here. But Be the Change, I just wanted to share a little bit about the podcast and where it all started, because I think that's a great way to kind of kick off this new show. So I started Be the Change over 3 years ago, which is crazy because it started out very organically. On June 1st, 2020, I was in DC, and I was on the phone with my dad, actually, and I had finished my workday. I interned for a congressman in DC, and I had finished my workday. I was walking around. I was going to go home and make dinner, and my dad was like, "Lily, there is a huge protest going on. You're in Washington, D.C. There are protests all around the country." And this was following the murder of George Floyd. And so I was like, "You're so right. Like, I have always wanted to be a journalist. I have always wanted to share stories and tell people about what's going on around the world." And I was kind of missing this moment, and such an important moment in U.S. history. And so I realized that I needed to be there. And so my phone was on 7%, and I just took off running. And I actually did run to Lafayette Square Park. And I went to these protests that were happening all throughout the summer, but this one in particular on June 1st, 2020. It was in front of St. John's Church, and while I was there, the protest was entirely peaceful, and people were chanting, people had signs, and it started out, especially during the day, it was very peaceful. And then the protesters were cleared out, and later Donald Trump staged a photo op in front of St. John's Church. And later that area would become Black Lives Matter Plaza. But that night, the park police cleared out all of the protesters, and they used tear gas, and they shot rubber bullets. And it was a very scary scene to be a part of, but it was very interesting to me as someone who hadn't really attended protests before and someone who hadn't been in that situation before. I managed to film some recording and some audio from those protests, and that is actually the theme song that you heard. That is the theme song of my podcast, and it's also going to be for this show. I love to get started that way because I think that sharing stories and really amplifying voices and the news and just sharing what's going on in society is what fuels democracy. And so I think that chant, "This is what democracy looks like," that has been kind of my motivation for doing this podcast. So for me, I started this podcast by sharing my own story at that protest, because at the time there were so many narratives about the Black Lives Matter movement and what the protesters were doing at these different protests, and they were all around the country. And so you heard stories of people, looting stores and things like that. But then my own experience was that the protesters were entirely peaceful, and there was violence in the form of, this tear gas, and it was just so scary for protesters, and there were young people there, and it was just an experience that I wanted to share. And so I shared my experience and with mostly my friends and my family. And from there, it turned into a podcast where I was able to feature some local activists in Washington, D.C. that were organizing movements in that space. And then it moved to become more national as I started to move around. And I went back to college in Virginia. And then when I went to Oxford, and when my scope became and the people that I was interacting with were more international, my podcast also became more international. And so I started to reach international guests and audiences. And so today I have published over 170 episodes featuring over 170 guests from 25 countries, which is absolutely crazy. Just looking back, it's been over 3 years of doing this, and it started out as something that allowed me to share my own experience and educate some of my friends and family about what was going on at these protests, especially because of COVID, and they couldn't see it with their own eyes. So I was kind of sharing that experience and kind of showing them what was going on to the best of my ability. And now here I am, and I've been able to feature so many people and talk with so many amazing people about work that they're doing to really make a change in their communities. So definitely check out Be the Change podcast if you haven't. And as I said, I will still be publishing episodes of the podcast with guests from around the world every Wednesday, and I'll also be featuring changemakers that are closer to home. And this show is going to be every Wednesday at 5 p.m., and I will be hosting these in person, but then I'll also be posting these on my podcast feed every Friday. So in case you missed the live show, they'll also be on my feed on Fridays. So definitely look out for the Be the Change podcast episodes on Wednesdays and the live shows on Fridays. So I also want to just give a little teaser for next week. I'm going to be featuring Darcy Coria, and she was awarded Miss Wales in 2022, and she became the second woman of color to win the title. And Darcy is a Black rights advocate, and she has been involved in shaping anti-racism legislation in Wales. And so we're going to be talking about her experience as a pageant queen, her work as an activist, and so much more. So definitely tune in next week, and that will be on November 1st, and it will be 5 p.m. live, and then on November 3rd, it'll be on the Be the Change podcast feed. So thank you so much for tuning in to this first week, and I am so excited to be able to share Be the Change in this live format and be able to really show you guys kind of these conversations more live, and I hope that it feels more personal than maybe the podcast does, because of course, less editing, less, theme music and stuff too. So I hope that this feels a little bit more intimate, and I'm so excited to be able to share conversations in this form. And so I'm excited to see where this takes us, and I hope that you tune in next week. Bye, guys.